So the SCADA system replacement is essentially an update on that, the RFP went out. We had, and it was published in the newspaper. We went through all of the required notifications on that. We had one response, and that was from Butch Nielsen of Cape Cod Water Resources. So he has gotten the contract. I saw that the paperwork has been completed and just awaiting on his signature now. It's been approved and signed by the town. So the next step will be to get started on that project. So, and that will hopefully start within the next few weeks. And essentially the price on that was the same as what we had seen before, except it increased by $2,000 because of the requirement for a bond on that. So, and the bond cost was the $2,000. Masonic Lane, that's what we have Austin and Richard here for. So, and I believe you were looking to get a decision from us, or at least a confirmation from us about how we proceed with respect to the cost associated with the installation of the main and the connection fees. So right. Our understanding, when we discussed this, that since you are installing the main from Witts Lane up to Masonic Lane, that we would be waiving the connection fee for the properties that are involved.
And you would pay to install the curb stop on Witts Lane that we would.
That one curb stop on Witts Lane. Right.
I've done a very basic agreement that just says basically that the board would put a curb stop in and waive the fees, and the property owners, and there are 5 of us, I guess, would pay to put a service main up from Witts Lane to Masonic Lane and then down to the Masonic Lodge parking lot. And we would then donate that line to the town, and we would grant an easement for maintaining the line.
Right.
And at that point, everybody could hook up. And I think everybody's going to, but I resisted putting that in as a requirement. I think everybody will. I mean, all the approved properties will.
I remember, Richard, when we did Baker Avenue, that because that was private way over there, that we had to have, everyone had to sign on to the easement, particularly if it's on Masonic, extending the main onto Masonic, it has to be.
Oh yeah, no, I agree that the easement will be done by all the parties whose property it touches the lane that
right.
where the pipe is.
Okay. And did you receive a copy of the easement that we used for?
No, I haven't yet. Okay. I haven't. No.
Rebecca, we do have that, right?
Yes. I'll go through and double check, and if I don't, I'll email and let you know, but I'm pretty sure it's I have it in my email files.
It should be on any of those properties on Baker Avenue. There should be an easement in the file.
Okay. Oh yes, there is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just don't want to reinvent the wheel. If it's something that
no, it was approved by Copeland and Page, and so it's a standard, and then that's what we used for all those properties. So, and you would then, as far each individual property then would have a separate connection and their own meter, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So we will cover that, the meter, as part of, because that's normally in the connection fee.
Okay.
I just had one question about it. Richard, I don't know if you've given thought to this, or Austin, but during the period of construction and you're contracting with Robert B., I guess you're going to use Robert B. Auer, are you going to do that collectively as a group, or is there a project manager, or how are you going to do that in terms of both the construction then transfer?
Well, they're going to do all the construction of Robert V. Hour. And Austin will be responsible for collecting all the money and supervising them. Right, Austin?
That's correct, Richard. I'll be the collector.
And it's
Richard will be the enforcer.
it's my understanding that from talking with the Robert V. Hour, that they actually want to put the line in first because they don't want to have to track the line based upon an existing easement. They want to be able to put the line in, and then they'll tell us the extent of the easement that we need to grant to the town.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So, and I would say that since this becomes part of the water system, that we would want, Whitewater to be at least advised and able to inspect as that work is being done. And that's normal. That's what they've done in the past. When they did the water main for Cumberland Farms, that's the way it was. It's just that, a representative from Whitewater did ensure that they were, following the requirements for the installation. And I would assume they're going to do the drawing for you, correct?
Whitewater?
Yeah, no, not Whitewater.
Robert
V.
Hour. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's all part of it, isn't it, Austin? Austin?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Good.
So
Yeah,
whoever has to be the check and balances, of course, that's understandable. That's done. So that's with Robert B. Hour and Whitewater in the town. So we're all set with that.
The one that I had this afternoon was, I don't know that anybody's actually sat down and calculated whether a 2-inch line is big enough.
Neil, do you have a comment on that? There's upwards of 4 properties.
Yeah, and the property that Heidi Kravitz owns is a 4-family. So it's more than a normal single family, I would think.
Yeah.
I just don't want to do something where if we spend a little bit more money now, we wouldn't run into a problem later on. And I don't know. I remember looking at it when there was a suggestion that I hook up to the Goldman's 1-inch line. At that time, at least to me, it didn't seem like it would pass the state building code to have a 1-inch line service both of us.
Is Neil on now in terms of audio?
He's getting there.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if we, in your language, state this, whatever the size line, whether it be 2 or whatever large or 2 minimum, whatever it is required to service all the properties, that would suffice the conversation, would it not?
I think so. I believe that in situations where we've had multiple properties on the line, the 2-inch line has been satisfactory. In fact, at some of the locations out on Coles Neck, it's a 2-inch line out there as well, and some of the side streets.
So if we say minimum of 2-inch line, we should be covering ourselves.
Right.
And would we then have the Robert B. Howard company decide what size is needed?
I think
They gotta make a decision.
Whitewater and BR would be the one to determine that, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I'm fine with that then.
I don't know what Tom is saying.
That line, will it be sufficient size legally? I mean, we have the 8-inch minimum on the rest of our mains.
We have, like there are streets, like off of Railroad Avenue, we have, I believe it's 3 properties out there that are connected via a 2-inch line that was put in a few years back. And then I know out on Whitetail and a couple of the other streets out there that it goes from 4-inch down to 2-inch wherever it after it leaves Coles Neck Road. And that's been in place now for 30 years out there.
Well, if it's okay with you, I'd like to leave it up to Whitewater and the Robert B. Hour Company in terms of what size is needed.
Right. Yeah, and the only thing I would say, Richard, is that the difference between a 2-inch and a 4-inch it could be significant in terms of cost. So you probably, if it's manageable with 2, that's what, we'd be satisfied with.
I agree. I just don't want to do something where we do a 2 and then find out we should have done a 4, because it would be a lot more expensive to then replace the 2 with a 4.
Right.
So-
Understood. Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Procedurally, how do you want to move forward with this? Do you want me to put together an agreement?
Yes, why don't you do that and get it over to us through Rebecca, and then
Okay.
we can take a look at it at our next meeting in 2 weeks.
But we should go ahead and plan on moving forward. We'll get Robert B. Hour and Whitewater to start looking at the sizing of it and whatever else needs to be done.
Right,
Okay, sounds good.
okay. So I guess if there's no other questions on that, we can move on.
So, Mr. Chairman,
Did you need to vote?
a vote from your group?
I think we had already voted, but we can vote again, because let's see. I think we've got everybody here now. Is Kateri still with us?
Yeah, she is.
Okay, so we could take a vote on this, that we are going to move forward with allowing the residents on Masonic Lane to contract with Robert Howard for installation of a main up from Witz Lane up to Masonic Lane to cover up to 4 properties up there.
Actually, 5.
Pardon?
5 properties.
Up to 5 properties. And that the town will be responsible for installation of the curb stop down on Witz Lane and provision of the meters, individual meters for each of the properties.
I'd second, but I can't.
Yeah, I know.
Well, let me, and in exchange for the installation of the main, the town of Wellfleet will be waiving all other connection fees.
And the property owners will donate the line to the town and
And the property will be,
Ed,
yes, property owners will be donating, so.
Jim, Helen Miranda Wilson has her hand up.
Well, we haven't even seconded the motion, so let's do that first.
Can we read back do you want to try reading back something, Rebecca? It's kind of complicated. I think we want to make sure it's complete.
Yeah, you guys said it in a segment. I didn't write it down. I'm listening to you.
Okay.
So if you want to put it all together in one sentence right now, including what you just said, Kurt, because you added on to it at the very end. Hold, please. I'm going to write it down.
I've actually written something out if you want me to read it and you could say whether you agree to it or not. Basically, I wrote out the Board of Water Commissioners has agreed to install at the Board of Water Commissioners' expense a curb stop on Witz Lane adjacent to the Coritz property and to waive the water connection fee for the property owners' properties. The property owners have agreed to install at the property owners' expense a service line from the Witz Lane curb stop up to Masonic Lane, then down to the Masonic Lodge parking lot with curb stops for each property. Once the service line is installed, the property owners will donate the service line to the town of Wellfleet and grant an easement to the town for maintaining the service line. Property owners have agreed that all work will conform to the town's existing specifications. The only thing that needs to be added to that is that the Board of Water Commissioners will be responsible for the water meters.
And all
Second.
future, Kurt, you said it, all future installations are,
All connection expenses,
that's
all
what you,
connection expenses will be waived.
got it. Richard, will you send that to me?
May I get a second on that?
Second.
Okay, so now we can open it up for discussion before this. So you said that you had one hand up?
Helen Miranda Wilson has her hand up.
Jim, thank you for recognizing me. I have a question. So the pipes are going to be, in quotes, donated to the town, and that means the town will then be in possession of them. Does that mean that when the pipes need to be replaced in the future, and of course they will, who pays to have them repaired and or replaced?
At that point, it becomes the responsibility of the town.
Yes, okay, just to have that clarified. The second question is, I believe, still in your regulations, forgive me for not having reread them today, typically aren't water meters, the maintenance of them, isn't that the responsibility of the unit that's being served, owners of the unit?
Well, in
Or
this
did you
case,
change that?
no, in this case, once the facilities, once the water main, the addition is completed and turned over to the town, the meters are installed. Once the construction is complete, each of the homeowners still has to sign an agreement with the system to be on municipal water. So the standard terms and conditions of a connection of any homeowner in the town would be identical.
In other words, if there were a problem with, let's say, a meter froze because it's, say, inside a basement or something like that, that would be the responsibility of the property owner to replace that.
Yes, thank you.
Which is the case now for all other the only difference here that we're saying on that is that normally the cost of the
Yes.
meter included in the connection fee. Any other comments? All right, I'd like to take a vote on it then. So we'll start. Kurt,
Aye.
Tom,
Aye.
Kateri,
Hold on, let me see if I can unmute her for you.
Aye, yeah,
I got you, Catherine. You're all set.
yeah, aye.
Neil.
Aye.
Okay. All right. So, and I say aye as well. So that's unanimous on that. So we'll look forward, Richard, to getting your the copy of that agreement letter.
Just email it to Rebecca right now.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
And
And
we'll
we'll get the
I got it.
the easement letter out to you so that you can use.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you for your help.
Okay, thank you.
So now it's up to us, Mr. Chairman, to contact Robert Biauer and start that process.
Yes, and to alert
Whitewater.
you or Robert Biauer need to alert Whitewater to what the schedule is.
I presume Robert Biauer will do that part because they'll be in charge of their own schedule.
Right.
Okay.
All right. If there's
Thank you,
nothing more,
everyone.
if there's nothing more on that, I would suggest that we move on.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the next item on our agenda is the issue of the bacteria being found in a water sample that we had. And the status of that now is, I'd like to make sure everybody's aware that in fact that the boil water order was lifted, and we are no longer under the restrictions that we had in place before on this. And we do have a full report of the chronology of this. I'm going to ask Eric Smith of Whitewater to update us on that, what happened and what Whitewater did with respect to this and where we are now with it.
Thank you, Jim, and the board. I know I've spoken with all the members of the board, but Jim and Rebecca and I have been in discussion quite a bit throughout the event. And thank you for everyone's support along the way and the open and honest communication. So thank you very much. As you know, we've been working closely with DEP throughout the whole process, from the first detection within the system, and have worked at their advisement and recommendations for all steps. Jim, where would you request that I start specifically related to things? I know we have the formal timeline that's been communicated out. Were you looking for a briefer version of that, or kind of going through some of those items?
Yeah, well, I would say, I think it would be helpful just to review what the chronology was on this, particularly of the testing, when and where, and when what the major communications have been with DEP and when those occurred.
Okay. So the first detection came, or the report and the results back from the first detection were on the 24th. That was at the Coles Neck Gristmill PT tap, not at the well, but at the PT tap there. And those results were collected as part of routine samples on the 23rd. At that time, those results were communicated to Mass DEP. Initial instruction was for downstream sampling. That was those results were collected per Mass DEP's direction. There was some discussion at that point as far as the Coles Neck Gristmill pump station, being that the station was not knowingly supplying any water to the town. We were using the Boy Scout wells on the other side of town, and we were really just the Gristmill Coles Neck station was really being utilized as a backup source. We were keeping it active as a backup source should anything else go down in the town and we needed to supply water. So we were flushing the wells locally. There's a well on site there. I mean, a fire hydrant on site there within approximately 75 feet of the pump station. So that's where localized flushing was being done. So we had some discussions with DEP, collected supporting samples that weren't necessarily required at that point because that system was offline. But we collected those, got results on the 25th. Those were further out in the collection system. I do not have the specific locations up here in front of me. I apologize, but off of Coles Neck Road there, Whitetail and Oak Ridge, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jim.
Yes.
And we had those locations there. From there, communicated with Mass DEP, and they required an additional round of sampling, which we collected that day on Friday the 25th. Results were received on Saturday the 26th. At that point, the determination was made to institute the boil water notice. Documents were provided by DEP to Whitewater and to the town, and that's when you went into the process of alerting via the system and other means that the town had. Direction was given from Mass DEP for Whitewater to begin disinfection within the system. That began early Sunday morning. I was on site for that, as well as one of our other service technicians for the project. We began chlorination from the Boy Scout wells and the water tower, simultaneous chlorination at both of those spots, and an injection point there with a chemical feed pump at the water tower, and manual addition at the wells. We began pumping from the wells, blending at the water tank to get a good mix to allow that chlorinated water to begin to work out into the distribution system. Began monitoring locally there where we had a chlorine residual, again per DEP's request, and communicated the levels that we had there initially at the system. We began flushing out in the collection system off of Coles Neck Road. We had a point there where we could perform at a reasonably high rate and draw water through the system all the way from Boy Scout and the water tank all the way up through the system, and continued flushing throughout the majority of the day, moved flushing from there to the Coles Neck hydrant, which is really the end of system point, and flushed there throughout the night to assure that we got disinfection, chlorination out system-wide, which was the best approach. So all done at the guidance of Mass DEP. From that point on, they required our first round of sampling, which was done at Monday morning to confirm where we were at. That was system-wide sampling at approximately 11 points. And we collected those results, 24-hour turnaround time approximately on those results. Regardless, additional chlorination was performed. We collected results Tuesday morning, irregardless. We didn't have the results in yet, but collected follow-up samples. And Tuesday afternoon, we received a negative result on our first round of samples, indicating that there was no presence of E. coli in the system or total coliform. Continued with flushing and chlorination practices and monitoring of the system. The results came back Wednesday for Tuesday's results, Tuesday's sampling, again, negative for total coliform and E. coli. And we had resampled then on Tuesday for Wednesday, putting us in a position to finally lift the boil water notice after 3 clear rounds of sampling on Thursday. Let me look at the date there. On Thursday the 1st, to put us in a position to, with Mass DEP's direction and guidance, to lift the boil water notice.
Eric, can I make or ask one question on this? In terms of the chlorination that took place, what was the residual amount of chlorine in the water during and after these after the chlorination?
Sure. It fluctuates, as we move water throughout the system and things like that. So I believe some of the chain of custodies I had provided had the chlorine residuals right on there, but we were approximately 0.67 to 0.68 on that first day at the water tank. And then throughout the week, as we were collecting additional samples, sampling range from 0.6, 0.3, down into approximately 0.2 range at some of the outer points. I believe out at Coles Neck, the furthest point out, initially we had some results in and around 0.18. So indicating a presence of chlorine out there, but certainly well below the MCL that's allowable for chlorination across the system.
What is the allowable MCL?
A 4.0, which would be, noticeable, certainly. Systems that we have that we operate that are chlorinated range from between 1 and 2 at different areas throughout the system. So those are within chlorinated systems. Those are still like acceptable levels with, really, you notice that there's some chlorine to it, but it's not overpowering by any means. So, but again, never violated any of those thresholds for chlorination. We're well below that, but clearly it appears to have a good, between the flushing and the disinfection, that there's been no presence of total coliform or E. coli throughout the system since then. We collected additional samples today. We will be collecting additional samples on the 13th as of right now, system-wide, anywhere from between 6 and 15 total samples across the system. And we will slowly be working over the next 3 to 4 weeks to decrease the chlorination that we're adding at the Boy Scout wells and at the tank. Basically, each week reducing it by approximately a quarter until we have no chlorine residual out at the furthest point. That's our goal. as a non-chlorinated system, our goal is to get that. And Mass DEP will likely require, additional testing throughout that period. And, we anticipate, having no total coliform or E. coli as we have right now.
And then, can you speak to the communications with DEP since then, where we're at now?
So where we're at right now is they have the different actions that have been spelled out, as far as chlorination, working through dechlorination, working on additional public notice based on a draft public notice from DEP following the relief of the boil water notice. We had some comments there and some fact clarification. We're given the opportunity for some input, worked with Mass DEP, and the board yesterday submitted that some revisions for the public notice back to them and are awaiting the finalized public notice that DEP is requesting be posted in the local paper. And again, just kind of working through all of the necessary sampling, timeline, and subsequent level 2 assessment that will be required within 30 days of the MCL violation related to the E. coli.
Are there any questions up to this point from anybody?
Yeah, if I could, Eric, how usual is it for notice of E. coli contamination to take the sort of the timeline that it did in terms of not getting results back definitively to get to a boil water order by Saturday? Is that a usual sort of course of events, or is it longer than usual, or how does that square with other systems that have gone through this process?
And following DEP's process and procedures, I would say that the only deviation there lies in the Coles Neck, I call it Coles Neck grist mill pump station there, where that system was offline, not being utilized to supply water to the system right now, but being kept as a viable backup water source. It ended up, communication of that to DEP basically gave us a 24 hours of additional time that you wouldn't have normally expected, because under DEP's assumption is that station is offline and really wouldn't have required any additional testing after the initial hit because that station was offline. So because of the that communication and that irregularity where it was offline, being kept as a viable backup source, but it was still capable of potentially introducing water into the system because it's not fully valved off from the system, because it's being kept as a viable backup to the system.
And apparently that happened. So my other question is, in your subsequent, since we got the boil water ban in your Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday sampling regimen, you're basically taking samples daily, so that because the lab is taking a day to get back to you, there's no additional lag. And I guess on Wednesday you waited till Thursday to get the sample results back, which then indicated on Thursday that you needed to go out and do some more sampling. And then you waited to get the samples back on Friday rather than taking some on Friday as well. So it's sort of like each of those days we kind of lost a day, it seems like.
Yes, so Wednesday samples into Thursdays with the DTEC would have triggered no action at that point other than additional resample. So you have samples that are collected on Thursday into Friday. So there would have been no potential for any action, even with any of the questions regarding the Coles Neck Gristmill Pump Station being online or offline until Friday. But because of the questions related to that station and the full isolation from the system, it triggered a carryover into Saturday, waiting for those results from Friday.
So in other words, had we sampled daily, we could have saved some time in terms of being able to get out with notice sooner.
No, we were still sampling daily. So Wednesday samples were collected, Thursday samples were collected, Friday samples were collected throughout all of those days. But if there hadn't been any question related to offline versus the isolated status of the Coles Neck Gristmill Pump Station, potentially there could have been a communication on Friday versus Saturday.
So we might have lost, overall, we might have lost a day.
Might have lost a day.
Okay. And clearly it sounds like water, in fact, did migrate from Coles Neck, and that seems to have been the source, right?
So potentially, right? We can't assume, we can't say 100%. Logically, based on the path of sampling and what we saw there, it very well could. But the well itself never came back positive for total coliform or E. coli. The sample was collected at the 100-foot tap. So again, possible, but the approach of chlorinating at the Boy Scout wells and the water tank, drawing that chlorinated water throughout the system to the end, was certainly the right approach to assure that we covered the entire town appropriately from any potential risk. Looking at it, is it plausible and likely that the Coles Neck Gristmill Pump Station was a source? It very well could have been, but we can't assume. We have to assume that it could have come from somewhere else as well. And I think the approach across the board and the supporting direction from Mass DEP on that and our ops group was appropriate.
So just speaking of sources, I just wanted to clarify something, because there was a rumor flying around that there was some concern that the fire department had responded to an unexploded ordnance situation a couple of weeks prior, and someone in town made a comment that they were convinced that this contamination came from that particular episode. Can you tell us whether that has any plausibility whatsoever?
So I'm not aware of anything related to that. I couldn't really think how that would really have an impact on that. Total coliform and things like that can happen within a system, and they're an indicator of some bacterial possibility, but not of the more harmful E. coli bacteria. But E. coli bacteria in itself is usually derived from like a human or animal waste being introduced somewhere within the system. And when that happens, it's there's a host of different areas where it could be introduced from, but it's usually like at the well or potentially at a storage tank location. And where the Boy Scout wells throughout all of our routine sampling and subsequent sampling, along with the water tank from our routine sampling and subsequent sampling, have always come back negative for that. No indication there. And just having it up there at Coles Neck, there's a potential that that well could have been impacted somehow. How exactly? Again, still unknown at this time. As part of the level 2 assessment that we're going to be working on, we may determine something at that. But the Coles Neck Gristmill Pump Station is fully isolated and has been since Saturday. Was it Saturday the 25th or the 26th? I apologize. I'll just check my calendar. But
26th.
From Saturday the 26th, it's been fully isolated there at the pumps so that no water can be introduced into the system, but we're still able to flush back throughout.
And is that a change that you made, a physical change that you made?
It is. Well, when I say physical change, we isolated the valves. They were open before to allow the local flushing from the hydrant that's right there at the Gristmill Coles Neck pump station. But, when we with the suspicions around that being the potential source, we fully isolated so we could assure that there couldn't be any introduction of water from the Coles Neck Grist Mill wells.
But I guess from the public's perspective, just to maybe ask the question slightly differently, is there any way that contamination could be introduced from the fire department hooking up to a hydrant?
I couldn't say definitively. I don't believe so, but I couldn't say definitively.
Have you ever heard of such a case?
I haven't. But I can certainly circle back with the team on that and get back to the board.
Yeah, I mean, I'm only asking the question because what's really helpful and important is obviously you're in the midst right now of a continuing investigation. So there's still information we're learning, and there are still things that we don't know. But certainly the public would want to know, and definitively whether, something like hooking up to a hydrant could cause a problem on the system. And, if there's a rumor that's not correct or there's information that's floating out that's incorrect, I do think we want to be in a position to answer those questions and concerns with the best information that you can obtain.
Absolutely.
Let me ask if there are comments or questions by any of the other water commissioners at this point. If
I have
not,
I have two people listening with their hands up, Jude
Yeah.
and then Helen.
all right. Well, we can proceed with those.
Jude, you first.
Thanks.
Okay, I'll go
Jim.
first.
Sorry, I'm here. Thank you, Jim, and thank you, Helen. And thank you for that presentation. Who were you mostly speaking to at DEP? Because we as a town are often in conversation with them about our water and wastewater issues. So was there one person in particular?
Yeah, our primary point of contact that we use regionally related to this matter was Karen Doobie.
And does the Board of Water know this person?
Yes, I've had conversations with her as well.
Okay. And I'm sorry if this is a stupid question, but back in April when this part of the system went offline, was that expected? Did everyone know that? Because when you gave the same presentation to the select board 10 days ago or whenever that was, it seemed like you were kind of surprised, or, how was that revealed? It seems like, did the water board know that? It seems to me like you knew there was a problem down there for a while. So I'm just wondering, is that why it went offline?
Well,
What was going on to lead up to that?
Yeah, well, if you were on the call at the beginning of the meeting when we talked about the SCADA system, that's one of the issues that we've been facing out there, that there have been problems with the control system for particularly out there at Coles Neck. And that's why that is being replaced. We also had a situation with one of the wells out there having to be replaced, one of the pumps having to be replaced out at Coles Neck earlier in the spring. And that contributed to the issue of some cloudiness in the water out there. And that was a reason why they weren't pumping from Coles Neck for the, through that period, and until we could get the SCADA system replaced.
Okay, so since April, it was decided that you couldn't use it. But you say you frequently, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I wouldn't say that we had decided not to use it. It was just a choice of just using the Boy Scout camp wells because they were the primary water source in the system. And we would pump from the other source if there was the need to, if the system went down. However, and that's why they were continuing to test on a routine basis, the wells out there as well as the wells at the Boy Scout camp.
Well, right, they have to do that. But when was the last time they flushed the system before the problem?
Eric, I can't answer that.
And when you say that, I hope I'm getting your name right, Jude, but when you say flush the system, are we talking system-wide flushing? Or are
No,
we talking
through the
specifically
hydrant,
radiating?
as you described, to kind of cleanse that area that wasn't being used to keep it fresh. When was
I
this
believe
last time?
I believe that's like a weekly process of flushing there.
Are you certain of that?
I'm fairly certain of that.
Can you double check when that was done?
Yep.
That'd be great. And one last thing, when this was all going out, what's the protocol for contacting town personnel? Who was that? Was it Jim? Was it Rebecca? Was it Ms. Broadbent? Who did you call first?
Is that to me, Eric Smith?
Yeah, to Whitewater, yeah.
Yep. So when we have an issue like this, we're reaching out to Mass DEP, to notify them, and then reaching out to the board and typically Rebecca and Jim.
So Rebecca or Jim, when did you first hear of this?
I heard of it Saturday night after the boil water order was required, after DEP requested the boil water order be put in place.
And Rebecca?
Through Rebecca.
Okay, so Rebecca, you maybe were the first, and that was Saturday evening.
Correct.
So that just seems like a very long time from when these things were happening. I can understand not telling the public for DEP regulation, whatever, but I just find it shocking that nobody else in town was told that this was happening.
So
Well, I
the
hope
way
that
it
that's
works,
been
Jude, is that they tested the water and we were told that there was an issue, but the state requires more testing to make sure that there was no lab mix-up, because it happens quite frequently that there is some sort of, they just don't want any mistakes with the
I
lab.
understand why you didn't tell the public. My question
No,
was
it's not
when
that I
you
didn't tell the
first
public, it's
heard.
that I was never directed to tell anybody. It was just an informative conversation like, hey, look, we're doing routine testing. This
And
is
E.
what's
coli
happening.
shows up? You think that's routine? I don't. I do
Jude,
not. I'm
Jude.
sorry. All right, I'm going to mute, but
Okay.
that is not routine.
Okay, if you have other issues with this, I would ask you to put it in writing to us, and we'd be happy to respond, but I don't want to take up the time during this meeting to be being critical of what people have done at this
I'm
point.
just underlying the severity of this situation. I'll mute myself now.
Helen,
Hi there. Two questions. Isn't it possible that from time to time backflow from a property owner's wastewater setup can be a source of contamination? I understand the engineering, the setups within dwellings and properties that have buildings very well. I remember learning about that. And there's a whole way in which the two systems, the drinking water system and the wastewater system, are separate. But sometimes there can be some backflow. And Eric Smith, doesn't that occasionally happen?
Helen, I think you spoke to it right there. They're very different independent systems with backflow prevention in place. So, I mean, you can never say never, right? But for the most part, it would be highly unlikely for that to ever happen, to be able to, within, plumbing and things like that, unless someone was to do something deliberately, and even then would be very challenging. You would have to have losses in system pressure and various other things to even ever potentially find yourself in that situation. It would be highly, highly unlikely. And
It is
certainly,
highly unlikely.
yeah, certainly no indication
A
across
safety
town of it.
plumber making an emergency repair, it can happen, but it probably didn't. Okay, my second question is more critical. I mean, it's more important. It's not criticism. So everybody was, and I do understand the delay. You don't want to tell people something that isn't true. Although it needs to happen sooner rather than later. But were the people hooked up, were the people who are hooked up to the system notified that you're continuing to chlorinate the system? I'm particularly sensitive to this issue because I've lived in 4 different places that chlorinated their water systems. And unfortunately, I'm one of those people who has a bad reaction to that, even when there's not a whole lot of chlorine. And people with babies or other sensitive situations, maybe you're fermenting things, maybe you're making bread, whatever, need to know if there's chlorine in the system, particularly if their sense of smell isn't too great, which is true of older people, or if they just, because they have had this good water that comes typically from our municipal water system, they're not really paying attention to it. And so have those people been notified of the flushing, in other words, the addition of chlorine, and the fact that, and I was surprised to learn this, you're still adding chlorination, Eric. I didn't know that. I thought that would have stopped. So that's 2 questions in one. How much longer might that go on? And is the DEP the arbiter of that? And 2, has every single person hooked up to the water system been made aware that they are drinking chlorinated water, no matter how slightly?
Eric, can I just, before you answer that question, I just want to make sure that I understand the data that you presented, which is that the state maximum is 4 parts. The typical chlorinated systems are running about 1 to 2, and that your initial chlorination rate on our system was 0.66, and that it's drifting down into the 0.2 range.
Yeah, that was 0.667 to 0.68 from some of the field kit results that I've seen, and that was right at the water tank. So that starts to dissipate across the system with dilution and just loss of chlorine across the system. But I don't believe we've had anything out across the system, and I'd have to check all of the numbers, but I don't believe we've had anything over a half a part throughout the distribution system. If we've had numbers that have been above half a part, they've been really, in and around the point of injection.
And what is the requirement for notice on chlorination?
So we did have the notice of chlorination in the boil water notice that we would be performing system-wide disinfection.
Yes, except you've now said that people don't have to boil their water, and that's good. And I'm not in any way objecting to your decisions about this. I'm just wondering if people know that however small the amount, that the system is still being chlorinated, and when might that stop? That was my question.
Yes, it will stop at the direction of Mass DEP, and with the additional public notice that's being reviewed by Mass DEP, I believe that there is a note regarding continued system-wide disinfection.
We'll make sure that it's in there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Eric, though, to answer Helen's question, I think it's a good one. When do you think it might, when's your best guess of when that might stop?
What I've been told by DEP that it could be as far out as 4 weeks from the time we started disinfection. So it could be an additional few weeks right now of light disinfection, but we're already starting to roll back how much we're adding in there. So those values that I gave you of about just a little over a half a part in and around the point of injection, and less than half a part, and in most cases more like 0.25 or less within the distribution system, we're steadily working on lowering that less and less. So I don't know if I hadn't heard of any complaints from any residents, noticing the hypo smell, the bleach, the chlorination smell in their water yet. But when you have a system and people are not used to that, sometimes they can. But they've been at very, very low numbers regarding disinfection in the grand scheme of things. And as you stated, Kurt, like well below the the allowable amounts for disinfection within a system. But to Helen's point, and I don't agree, she's not used to that in the system, and we'll do our best to communicate that.
And Eric, this is Jim.
I'm not on the system.
Oh, okay. My apologies, Helen.
Yeah, I'd also point out that when we have done chlorination in the past, when they've done some flushing of the system, although I don't know that that has been communicated. So that's probably something that we need to alert our customers to, that if there's ever an event where we're going to chlorinate, that we should make them aware of that and the reason that we're going to chlorinate.
Understood.
One other thing on this, Rebecca, if you would, could you kind of tell us what happened on your end in terms of, I know that there was a bit of a scramble relative to the notification system. The police department initially had a system that really wasn't adequate to inform all of our customers. And I know you and Jim spent a lot of time getting up to 100% or close to that notification as soon as we got the word on Saturday night. But can you kind of give us some background on kind of where you started out on Wednesday and where you ended up by, let's say, late Sunday in terms of notice and how that notification will work going forward?
Absolutely. So I actually didn't get a phone call until I think it was either Thursday or Friday, just saying, hey, look, we're doing testing of the system. We've tested over by Coles Neck, but it's not a distribution well. So, we'll keep you posted. Friday night, I got a phone call, or late Friday afternoon. I think it was Andy who actually called me from Whitewater and said, listen, we've detected something. We've told Mass DEP, but because it's a well that is not in distribution, they're not concerned, but they want us to do a couple more testing. And I said, okay, no problem. I got a phone call 7:15 on Saturday night. I spoke with Andy over at Whitewater, and he said, because the well was not as isolated like we had thought, DEP has asked us to issue a boil water order. So I went ahead and I emailed the board right after that and said, this is what's happening. I got in contact with the police chief and said, how do we go about doing this? And he said, we do have a code red system. He said, but it's only for people that have signed up. He said, let me see if I can get just a mass phone call out there right now issuing that. It was very kind of spotty Saturday night. It didn't go through quite well. It kind of came across as please see attached on a phone line, and you can't see an attached on a phone line. So they put it on the sign, a boil water order, 2 electric signs that were at the incoming of when you get into Wellfleet, and I think there was one over by the transfer station. Sunday morning, another call went out on the code red system that was a lot more detailed, saying this is a boil water. Unfortunately, the code red system goes out to anyone in the town who has signed up. So it could have been people on well water, it could have been people on town water. So there was a little bit of confusion there. I got together with Hillary from the Board of Health, and I was expressing to her that I needed a more complete system in the fact where it's not fair that well water people are now concerned with what's going on. Jim and I did spend 12 hours on Sunday calling every person we could. There were some backflows with that only because certain people who have moved and sold their properties did not update their information. So not knowing who the new owner was difficult for people we did not get in touch with or properties we were not able to. Jim and I made flyers and delivered them. So when I got in touch with Hillary, she has a health emergency line. And what it is she told me she could help me, and I sent over the spreadsheet of only the town water customers. So every town water customer, and I got it through Penachuk, our billing company, because they have the most up-to-date information regarding people on town water. We put it into that spreadsheet, and we issued Wednesday night kind of like a test thing saying, we have 2 samples that have come back good. We're waiting. Mass DEP requires that we wait for 3 good samples. We are waiting for a 3rd sample. We'll let you know. And then Thursday night, that came back. We sent that out. And everyone that was on the water system got that call or got that email. And the good thing about that system is It calls you, it emails you first. If you do not respond, there's a link underneath it that says you've confirmed you've gotten this email. If you do not click that confirmation, you get a phone call 10 minutes later. If you do not confirm on the phone call that you've received that phone call, the health department gets it back saying this, and this person did not receive your alert notice. So then we know exactly who didn't get it and who needs to either get another phone call or a visit with a flyer stating you no longer have to boil. And that's how that started. And we had a lot of good feedback from the release of boil water order, because we did reach people a lot faster than we did with the original boil water order. So going forward, hopefully nothing like this will happen again. But if it does, we have a better way to reach just town water customers through Hillary's system.
And you pulled that together within a week.
I pulled that together within 3 days. Yeah. Yep. And if I had known about it sooner, I would have gotten together with Hillary sooner. But again, nothing like this has happened before. So it was kind of one of those things that we just had to figure it out together. And because I had originally said, I want to learn the Code Red system. I want to learn everything about it. So if something like this does happen, I can issue a Code Red. And Hillary said, well, actually, this might work better because this can be just pinpointed to just town water customers. And it actually seemed to work a lot better.
That's fantastic. I don't know what to say.
Thanks.
It's amazing.
Yeah, really.
It was truly a remarkable effort. I mean, it just amazing.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'm pretty proud of what we did and the tools that we had with what we had, not knowing, honestly, as like you said, this hasn't happened in Wellfleet before. So, and from what I understand from other towns, E. coli is not something that's very uncommon. It's not safe, but it's not very uncommon. So, given the tools that we had, I think, yes, we did a really good job. And, I wish I had known sooner, because I would have let this, the town know sooner. But given the instructions by Mass DEP, you can't release something without knowing for sure that that's what it is. So, and we did that.
Yeah. So, any other comments from any of the water commissioners?
Well done.
Yeah, it was a lot of work.
It certainly was. It was
And we
fun.
still-
Jim and I had a great time.
Yeah, we still have a lot in front of us too. So on this, but we've learned a lot, and I think that I just want to make one other comment about the infrastructure here, and Eric may want to chime in on this as well. That because that's the system that we have, the wells up at the Coles Neck well site are not, if they're on, they're not isolated. Because we don't have a valve that would close the main right up there to keep, if in the event that any of those wells were turned on. So one of the things that we need to do, and the only valve, the closest valve right now for to close that main is down at Route 6. So I think in the construction that we're going to be facing, both with the SCADA system as well as with a new water main from there, that would be something that we should do. This should have been done when those wells were installed, that a valve should have been installed up there where we could close the main, but that did not happen. So now that needs to, and that's something we learned from this, that we need to take care of that.
Yeah, to build on that a little bit, Jim, as you said, as far as a means to isolate that section of the system, but still be able to run it, to keep it viable,
Right.
to be able to collect samples, like in this case, even with being able to, desire to be able to potentially bring that back online after the controls are repaired, is ultimately be able to do effective chlorination and testing and everything else before we do that. And right now, the only clear isolation point that would allow for that, and very well may be a part of it in the short term, is to, get a detail, isolate a portion of Route 6 to be able to safely close the valve there. Then we can flush back there, because right now in the practice that was being utilized is, the system is essentially pressurized. we open the hydrant there at the Coles Neck Gristmill station and could then turn the well pumps on. And with a pressurized system, you're theoretically flushing directly out of that hydrant that's right there. But under those circumstances, depending on what the system pressures are and other variables, could you introduce water into the distribution system? That's the unknown here. And that's what, with all of this, it's what could have happened. Do we know definitively? No. And that's why the system-wide approach to chlorination, starting from your primary source, was really the best approach. And I think put everyone in the best position possible from a public health standpoint.
Right.
But, we're looking at the valving options right now and to find the best solution to now be able to isolate, be able to flush, and at the end of the day, to be able to keep that hydrant that's out there as a viable source should fire or anybody else need it for any particular reason, which is the current case. It is at station, that hydrant is viable source, and because we have the wells valved off right at the pumps right now.
Good. Well, Eric, thank you very much for sharing all of that with us.
Well, and thank you for the questions from everyone. I mean, I think that's one of the best ways to help clarify and clear up anything. I have 2 items to look into following the call. The item related to the fire connection and any potential for backflow there, and from the weekly flushing, because again, that's my understanding from the team as they were flushing at that location. So I will confirm those 2. Certainly the flushing I can definitively answer. And then from the fire connection there, I'll do my best with our team and other industry personnel that we have on board to try to get an answer back on that as well for the board.
Thank you.
And also, Eric, you're doing this anyway, but also any procedures that we need to incorporate or that you think we should incorporate in the future with regard to an out of service well and how to bring it back into service and how, if there are other things that we could or should do to isolate and avoid what potentially could have happened here.
Yes, absolutely. That's going to be part of that level 2 assessment, and looking forward to working with the town on that based on findings.
So let me ask on that, Eric, do you think we should have this discussion before that level 2 assessment goes in?
I mean, we're going to have that discussion anyway, and it certainly makes sense based on all the facts at hand to go ahead and put the valving in there. You know that it would seem at some point we want to have Coles Neck Gristmill Pump Station as a viable source to supply at least portions of the town with water and be a backup. And to do so and be able to properly flush and everything else, putting the valving in between the pump station at that hydrant there will give you those capabilities. So it's a good proactive approach.
All right. If there are no further comments or discussion on this, I'd like to move on. All right. So I'm going to move over the Coles Neck water main issue for a moment, and talk about the issue of Harborside Village. And Kurt, do you want to kind of chair this part of the discussion?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think the background here is that the Mayo Creek Committee had done a report looking at restoring tidal flow to Mayo Creek. And that work was ongoing for quite a few years. They issued the report to the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen approved the idea of moving forward with that project. And it kind of got moved over a little bit onto the wastewater committee. The wastewater committee's involvement with it would simply be to look at it as a nitrogen mitigation strategy. And we've been in the process of trying to quantify, if that were to occur, how much nitrogen benefit could it provide to the overall wastewater plan. Keeping in mind that the Duck Creek, Mayo Creek watershed is the most impacted in the town of Wellfleet. And right now our consultant has said on numerous occasions, that's the watershed that keeps him up at night, that he's got heartburn over in terms of being able to ultimately comply, with DEP's projected nitrogen removal requirements. So, this potentially is a big thing, and it looks like it could be the Mayo Creek restoration could amount to as much as maybe even a third of the available mitigation within that, within that system. And it does restore ecosystem function to some extent. Clearly, Barry's on the, on the call here at the meeting. This could potentially have a big impact on HVCC. And so we as a committee have not, made any determinations, decisions, or otherwise. But at a minimum, as I, putting on my Board of Water Commissioners hat, it seems to me that the system would be well served if an anchor customer like HVCC was connected. One of our biggest problems in that particular part of the water system is that we're literally flushing water into a drain because our pH levels rise too high in the wintertime. So additional load in that part of the system would be very, very advantageous. In addition, a large customer like HVCC provides additional financial stability to the water system. So there's a big benefit there. And, I think what we were interested in, what Jim, you had asked Barry to provide, was some indication of the level of water that they're currently using. Could this make sense given their cost structure for them to even potentially connect? So, from my standpoint, it's an open exploration to see if, something could make sense. Looking at the addition or the initial water use, it looks like something within our rate structure at just our normal billing rates could make sense for them financially. And so that I think is worth looking at further and doing some more exploration. So that's kind of the background. I don't have a lot more to add to that. I think to the extent that the water system can provide a backup to them, they've got a commitment to their existing structure, but to the extent that we can provide a backup, I think it's in our interest to make some kind of an offer to them with regard to a backup option.
So Neil and I did go over there and met with them a few weeks back, and they provided us with some information regarding the amount of water that they use daily and on an annual basis. And it's our understanding that, like in the winter months when there's very few people there, that the consumption drops down significantly. It's probably in the range of 4,000 to 5,000 gallons a day for the entire place. In the summer months, it goes up to, say, it can go up to 12,000 to 13,000. But overall, over the course of the year, the average, I think, for 2019, not the average, but the total consumption for the year was 1,853,000 gallons, which is not, that's over the entire year. That's, I would say, is less than what we expect we're going to see from the affordable housing project on Lawrence Road, where we had assumed it was like 99 or close to 10,000 gallons a day there based on the 46 units. So this would have somewhat overall over the course of the year, a lower contribution in usage in terms of usage in the system. However, much of their usage would be in the summer months, and when their residents are in town. So
keep in mind, Jim, even I don't know how much water we're actually flushing during the wintertime now, but 6,000 gallons of wintertime consumption in that area might help us from not having to basically just flush water down the drain.
So going along with this, the next item that's on there is we were talking about evaluating the water system financial model. And this is one of the things that we really want to do in conjunction with, before we make any determination on even what a potential rate could be for Harborside, is Harbor Village. I mean, that we'd want to get a consultant in to help us with that, evaluating that model that we have talked about doing now for some time. So I think that that's our next step here, that we want to proceed with a search for a consultant to evaluate the financial model.
Jim, I did reach out on that following our last meeting.
Right.
So I spoke briefly with EPG, and Paul Miller called me back. Paul Millis, I'm sorry, called me back on that. And there's someone that he's recommending that they've worked with, and actually I think Whitewater's had some involvement, and it's the Abrams Group out of Framingham, Massachusetts. The gentleman's name is Mark Abrams of the Abrams Group, and that's specifically a big portion of what that group does, from my understanding, and they've worked with other communities on the Cape. So that was EPG's recommendation, and like I said, that was actually other team members in our group had mentioned that gentleman as well. So if you need any help facilitating that conversation, I'm happy to help in any way. But that would be one possible source to help with the rate structure and some of the financial components.
And another one that we had already started some discussions with was a firm of Ty and Bond out of Boston.
Yes.
And so I think we've got to start here. We got a couple of companies that we can reach out to for proposals. Ideally, it would be great if we could get one more on this, but so we'll continue that search. And Kurt, do you have anything else to offer on that?
No, I just think for Barry's benefit, one of the things that we've been looking at very strongly is how to encourage customers to connect, whether it's HVCC or others. And one of the biggest barriers we're finding has always been typically the high connection fee. And so that, in the process of looking at, when we're talking about rate design and rate restructuring, it's basically trying to find ways to either amortize or change the structure so that it's very easy for a customer to connect to the system. And then we, get away from the barriers to connection that have existed historically. There's other ways to make the finances work for potential new customers. And that's certainly one thing that we're looking at, and also, again, looking at the actual cost structure to serve a customer. So, for example, if HVCC comes online and we're actually saving money because we're not dumping water down the drain, that provides an opportunity within the rate design to say this cost structure for this rate ought to look more like this than what it's currently structured as. I mean, the DPU, the Department of Public Utilities, has always strongly advocated for rate structures that follow the cost of service. And basically, they want to see rates that look like what the cost actually is to serve that customer. And if the customer is reducing system costs, there's a benefit to them connecting. If that customer is increasing system costs, then that rate structure ought to reflect that. So, so I would just see those as kind of some of the principles that we would be exploring in looking at new rates.
Any other comment?
Jim, Helen has her hand up.
Sorry about that. I beg you, Board of Commissioners and Eric, before you go finding a consultant to do something that's very basic, and if I was able to do it all by myself back in the day, you certainly can too. Figure out how many gallons per day maximum get used. Look at your rates. and get a number for how much you would have to raise your rates in order to pay your normal maintenance and operation expenses. Then adjust and see what the rates should be if you adjusted them for seasonal use. In other words, it's normal in different municipalities to have, let's say, summer use gallons per day cost be higher. This can happen in like 20 minutes because you know how many hookups you have, and then take it from there. And that's very simple. And so at least if you then decide you need a consultant after having an agenda item where you discuss doing that, as opposed to trying to tempt people onto the system who the system, that is to say, will be taken care of forever after. Only tempt people who really need the water so that they have their legitimate need meetable for all time. As I said at town meeting, please, I beg you, take a very long-term look at this, meaning 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, okay? I beg you, just do this on the back of an envelope or with a pocket computer, have an agenda item about it, and then think about a consultant before spending money on a consultant. Just a thought. Thank you.
Helen, I'd like to respond on that. I think, you know, the town, we've gone through this before. I mean, the financial model that we have in place now was something that was devised, you know, many years ago, and there were assumptions made at that time that did not pan out, and that's why I think we have. That's one of the reasons we have the problems that we do now, where that the system is not self-supporting. Is that the assumptions did not come true in terms of the number of customers that we would have on the system and how we could support it. And so I think that's something that the reason that we are talking about using, you know, looking for a consultant to help us with this is that you mentioned one of the first things you said was talking about figuring out what your increase in the rate would have to be to support this. It may not be that we need an increase in the rate. It may be that we need to find a different way to spread costs over the system that are currently being funded, say, through a connection fee or whatever. And so that's where we want the assistance of companies that are a firm that does this. So, you know, because I'm not sure that any of us have that level of skill or knowledge here about water system rates. That's what many of these companies do.
Jim, I was there, and I thought the current model that, you know, we're still suffering from back in the day, I thought it was wrong. But it was perpetuated simply because, I mean, you could also have different rates for businesses and for, you know, dwellings if you chose to. Your consultant will bring this all up. I'm bringing it up. It's sort of Water System 101. And at least take a look at raising the rates. And if you raise them, you could have a very tidy way of meeting your normal costs, which includes, at a certain point, replacing pipes, which is very expensive. It would be more expensive for people to use water, but, you know, by God, they'd probably be more careful with it. That's the one way in which you can sort of put the brakes on profligate use of municipal water. Thank you.
Yeah, and Jim, if I can, I don't want to belabor this because we're running short of time here, but I'm glad to hear, Helen, that you were against the original financial model because it's having a connection fee based system isn't sustainable. And you're right. I think that water rates probably are too, you know, the actual per unit cost is probably too low, given that the system doesn't have enough revenue to sustain itself. But, you know, I think that's part of what there's two things that I see a consultant needs to do. I used to design rates at Boston Edison. I've worked for an electric utility doing this stuff professionally. So I have the skills, I don't have the time. The main thing that we need to do is get a system that is self-sustaining and where the rates are appropriate to the cost to serve the customer. So in other words, that is the way rate design should look. It should not be a sociologically driven or opinion driven kind of an approach, where we want to help this class and we think this other class can pay. I mean, some of that goes on in rate design all the time, but we don't really understand what our cost to serve our customers is. So sure, we can take the overall usage and divide up by what it costs us to run the system, but that doesn't tell us what it actually looks like where at the point of service to a particular customer, or if we need to add capacity in the system, who are the customers that would be causing that increase in cost that need to bear that additional expense. So it's a little bit more complicated, I think, especially when I agree with you that we need to be addressing the 20 and 30-year horizon. You're absolutely right.
Okay. Barry, is there anything that you want to ask or add to this? Can you unmute him, Rebecca?
Yeah, I'm a kind of in a unique position. I'm a fifth generation Wellfletian, so I've been in town since 1947. I moved away when I was 5, but summered here, so I've seen the town grow and I've seen the park grow. I'm now the owner of the house at 180 Kendrick, which has a stub, so I'm looking at this as a homeowner and as a potential user from the park. I want to hook up to town water at the house up here, and we have a lot of people. We have 82 units in the park. I don't know if you knew the size, but there's 82 units. And Jim, I think you alluded to the fact that our numbers fell in the summertime. We have probably 8 people year round. And so we don't have the capacity in there, but a lot of people think that because we draw the water out of the well in the ground, it's free. And we're trying to get a handle on, okay, what does it really cost us to pay the contractor? We have Bennett Associates, and if they, if we get their cost, we get your cost, and people start seeing what the cost is. That's one aspect of what we're doing. We're a new board. I'm newly elected to the board. And so nobody has looked at this since 2009. And so you've progressed quite a bit. And we've, changed since then. We're getting smarter on all of this. So we're trying to marry that up. And I'm also practical. Wells fail. And should this well fail and we have to switch over, whether it's economically feasible or not, I want to know what's that going to take. Is this a 2-week deal? Is this a 2-month deal? What would it take me to get connected and supply water? We are predominantly a summer unit, and so we're not dependent on living here. But boy, I tell you, you tell people, well, it's going to be 6 months before we have water, and by the way, this summer you won't have water. I'd really be probably strung up if I'd let that happen. So I'm just trying to position myself to get smart on all of this. I've heard a lot of, there's a lot of people that don't know that much about the water. There's some people here that are adamant that they want to stay on park water. They don't want to pay. There's other people, Kurt, you alluded to the salt marsh. There's people saying, well, if they flood the salt marsh and ruin our well, we'll get free water, and so we've been waiting for that to happen ever since they announced they were going to flood the marsh. So the practical matter is, if there's a delta in the cost, it might make sense to hook up to town. We just don't have enough facts. I don't think you have enough facts to give us that answer, but I want to be positioned to where if for whatever reason, economically or physically, we have to hook up to town water, what is it going to take? I'm told that you have stubbed us off into the park. And so we probably have a 50-foot trench we have to dig to hook up water to our main system. When you talk about a connection fee, is that fee a fee based on connecting, or is that a cost of meters, pipes, etc.?
That's one of the things that has not been determined. That's part of this evaluation of the financial model that we would have to come up with. I mean, as I believe I've told you, for a single residence now that goes on the system, the connection fee is $6,000. So obviously, we're not looking to get charged, 80 some units there at $6,000 a piece, anything like that,
Right,
And yeah, and in addition to that, I mean, just tonight we had that example, Barry, where you've got a group of homeowners who are doing the work to put in the main, and we're waiving the meter fee and any connection fees. So I think that's the precedent that we've been trying to set to make it attractive.
But if we are stubbed off, and my house is stubbed off, we paid whatever it was when the line came down to stub off, and I have a plastic pipe in the front yard sticking up out of the ground connected to town water. Is that $6,000 fee added on to whatever that cost was that they paid when the line came through?
No. If you signed up with the town back then you paid the connection fee back then.
Okay, because I get a water bill, and so
Then
I'm not sure, but I'm told that the park is stubbed off, and I think
what I would recommend you do, Barry, is to get in touch with Rebecca in our office, and she can pull your file and tell you exactly what the status of your account is at this point.
Okay, perfect.
It's 180 Kendrick.
180 Kendrick, yes, I'm stubbed.
So the only water bill that you get is a service fee because 180 Kendrick was paid in full. So they've already paid for the connection.
Yeah, the connection fee was paid.
Yes.
Okay, well, what about the park? Does the park pay the connection fee?
I'll look into that for you and I'll reach out to you tomorrow and let you know. I think so, but let me double check it.
And thank you, Rebecca. The boil water notification and the email, I appreciate the effort you put into making sure we were all notified.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Got excited here when they see boiled water, they don't understand what all that meant. It was reassuring to everybody to do that.
So I would just sum up where we're at with this, that our next steps here are to come up with a plan for evaluating the financial model. And we can't give any numbers at this point until we know better as to what that might look like. So we do want to proceed with that evaluation, be it through a consultant or however we agree on the proper method to do that.
Okay, and I'm going to work it on my end too to get smart on what does it cost me to pull a gallon of water out of the ground too, because we'll put those two numbers together. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on Harborside Village or the evaluation of the water system model, financial model?
Judah Hearn has her hand up again.
Yes, Jude.
I just wanted to share with you some numbers of what I pay at Pleasant Water Inc. It's $1,000 a year for 40,000 gallons. And if you pay a little early, you get $100 off. And it doesn't matter if you're seasonal or not, that's the minimum. So for 40,000 gallons, it's $900. Just for your information.
Right.
And we also have Bennett managing our wells.
Okay, so that's included in that. I assume that the $1,000 covers the cost of Bennett's fees as well?
Yes.
Thank you. Anything else?
That's double our bottom, our first tier rate, or more than double.
Yeah, so but if people think it's expensive, they could be paying double. I have. And we're still worried about having to replace the lines like you. So water is expensive, but without it, you have nothing.
Right.
Thanks, Jude.
Thank you. Okay, so I'd like to move back now just on the Coles Neck water main issue, and just let you know what the discussions have been on that up to this point. Mike Travato and I have met with Paul Millette of EPG, and we started talking about the process, if we were to use them, what we would need to do to proceed with the project for the installation of a new water main. And we don't know anything yet from Mass Works with regard to our grant application. But you know, we're keeping an eye on that. But one of the things is that if we do get a Mass Works grant, the expectation is that we will be shovel ready by the spring to begin construction. So that's why we're you know, pushing ahead with at least finding out what we need to do to proceed with this project. We're not committing any resources yet, but we are interested in figuring out the timeframes here and what we would need to do to move forward. One of the things that we have had discussions on, and we're going to be bringing this to the select board in the near future, and that is the process around selecting or approving use of EPG for the engineering services. It's my understanding from discussions with Mike and with Paul Millette, and in reviewing I think it's the 30B requirements for under mass regulations, that we are not required to put engineering services out to bid. And since we've been using environmental partners now for the past many years on the design and planning around the water system, it seemed to make sense to proceed in the same way going forward. That's a similar relationship that we have, say, like with Copeland and Page, our legal counsel, that you're not required, the state does not require you to put those kinds of contracts out to bid when there's a new project. So that we will be, but we want to make sure that however we set that contract up with EPG, that it's in the best interest of the town. And that they're adhering to best practices, and that their rates are consistent with the standard rates in the industry. So we will be having further discussions with them, and then we will be asking to go in front of the select board to discuss this and to let them know what our recommendations are with respect to the selection of a company or firm for the engineering services. Any questions?
Oh, I thought Tom was. I thought Tom had a question. You know, what do you think the value of the contract is, Jim?
Well, if you look at what environmental partners put into their estimates that they did back in January, they assumed that it was maybe about the total would be about 15% of the project costs. And they were looking at, I think, a number of approximately 220,000 for engineering design and the bid process, those initial steps in it. And then there's the second part of that would be for the project management, that, for construction. And this is the way they've handled the projects in the past. So the total was, I believe, around, and I will have to check this, I don't have that paperwork in front of me, but I believe it was around 400,000 for the total on a $3.8 million project, that included all the engineering fees and project management fees. So it's not just the design work, it's design plus management of the process and throughout from start to finish.
My only comment is that given, I know we've had a long relationship with them, but given that amount of money, I think we would be remiss if we didn't think about putting that out to bid.
Well, the question there is that, when this came up before, we've had this, the last component of the system that we put in 2013, I believe it was, when we did the work on Summit Avenue in that area. That question came up with the select board at that time, as why not put it out to bid? Well, the issue there, part of the issue will be that it's going to be impossible for us to meet any kind of deadline with respect to starting construction by the spring, if in fact we have to put this out to bid. And it's not necessarily required by the state. It's very clear that those are the two professions that are not required, where you're not required to do competitive bidding, and that is for legal and for engineering services. So I said that there are things that we can do to verify that whatever the rates they charge us, if it's 10% for the initial engineering fees for design and bidding, then it's fairly easy to figure that out as to what that should be in terms of if in fact the costs associated with that come in, they should come in at 10%, no more than 10% of the total project costs. Any other thoughts or comments on that?
Helen has her hand up again.
Yes. Yes, go ahead, Helen.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, I'm looking to be persuaded here, okay? That's where this question is coming from. Have any of you, has anyone done a door-to-door or unit by, lot by lot questioning of all the people along this proposed new stretch of pipe? I know I heard the figure of there could be about 80 hookups, right? Was that the right number? There could be, yeah. But have you actually asked people? And I understand, across the street from me, Eric's Way, there might be people up there. My neighbors, the Roses, might like it. They have bog water, as we call it here, which is not illegal. It's just people don't like it, and they have to have filters. Has that happened? In other words, I know that there are 1, 2, 3, 4 at least businesses, including Outer Cape Health, that have expressed interest, if I understood correctly. But has anybody asked all the property owners who dwell along this stretch whether they want water or not? In other words, are we going to get decent bang for our buck from spending this money to put these pipes in the ground? That's my overall, you know.
Yeah, I think, well, that's kind of a separate issue from the engineering costs associated with this. But
It's a little bit separate, but we're talking about the range of service that these pipes would be available to tap into. You're right. You know what? Forgive me, Jim. This really isn't the agenda item. You're just talking about, well, I don't know. It's the Coles Neck water main. So it is an appropriate question. That was the agenda item, right?
no, the agenda item was we call it Coles Neck, but it is the water main from the Coles Neck well field that's proposed to come down Route 6 and in on Briar Lane.
Right, so that's a nice general agenda item, and my question is simply, it's a yes or no answer, and no problem if it hasn't happened. I was just wondering if all the people who would possibly be able to hook up, whether they want to or not, we don't know at this point. They could change their minds. If there was a transfer of property, they might have to, but has anybody taken a poll?
Well, I can say that we've done a couple of things over the past couple of years on this. One was we did host a meeting with residents along Briar Lane that, asking for the level of interest there. And it was mixed, to be honest with you, no different than from other areas of town. My water's fine. I don't need to. My well is good. I don't need to hook up to a system. I don't want to spend money on that. That was one thing. And then there were others that said, yes, we would definitely be interested. So it was, it varied in that regard. I believe, and if Kateri is still on the line.
Still on, I am, yes. I had offered to do, because I've done a lot of survey research in the background, but it's complicated to do, and you really, we've been dealing with a lot of other issues that have come up recently that we've sort of backed off from that approach.
Okay, so
But we did actually have three different meetings that I can recall, Jim. So we had two meetings at the Water Board where we specifically discussed this, and there were local residents who came in to talk about Briar Lane. And then we did have a community outreach meeting where I think we had probably 15 maybe people, if memory serves me correctly. So we have done some due diligence, Helen, not to the extent of doing a survey of all residents, but we did do, and I'm not saying we shouldn't, but we did do an all resident survey for the original system, and lots of people wanted to hook up, and then, or at least the survey said they did, and then we got a fairly low number that actually did. So there's no argument that it's unclear how many people are going to hook up unless you do a betterment approach, and the town has chosen not to do that.
thank you.
Any other comments on that? Well, I think we'll still be coming in front of the, hopefully in the not too distant future, coming in front of the select board with respect to any kind of recommendation on the selection of an engineering firm to assist us with this. Okay, nothing more than, I think we've gone through the agenda items. The other thing left was minutes. Did we have minutes sent out, Rebecca?
No, I'm so sorry. I didn't send you out minutes. I was dealing with a water crisis in Wellfleet, so
That's right.
I'm just
A
kidding.
few more things to do.
I will get them to you, and we can, you guys can do them at your next meeting. I'm sorry.
All right.
So that's the case, then let's talk about the next meeting. I would recommend that we plan it to be 2 weeks out from today.
Good idea.
That gives you October 20th.
Okay.
Okay, and that would be still prior to when we have to submit the 30-day letter to be correct, Eric?
Yep, my apologies. I was on mute. So yes,
That's all right.
I'd have to just take a look at the calendar piece there, but yeah, and we fully intend to have the level 2 assessment, drafted and for review well ahead of that. Our approach on it is having our area manager, John Aprea, involved, but we're also bringing one of our additional lead operators with a fresh set of eyes in as well as we go through to just do our due diligence and meet DEP requirements and to our earlier discussion, if there's any opportunities for improvements along the way to, mitigate any potential situations down the road, that's what we're going to try to do.
Good. Well, we will look forward to hearing from you then 2 weeks from now on that. So, are there any other comments or discussion, any new business, anything we should be considering for our next meeting?
Well, thank you, Jim and Rebecca. You really went above and beyond.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You did a fabulous job.
It's a great
tough.
sunny Sunday, let me tell you.
Well, you guys did an amazing job in an extremely short period of time.
And now I know Jim's phone number by heart, so it's great.
Yeah.
All
right,
Gail
well-
Gail hasn't said anything all meeting, so I don't know if she had anything to add.
I almost called her just to keep her in the loop, but I didn't.
Before
Well,
we
I'm just
adjourn.
going to say good work, Rebecca and Jim. I'm going to add that. I was sort of following the trend on the Wellfleet community site, and I was happy to see that Rebecca jumped in on that site and, let everybody know that you were going to be working Sunday morning.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We did.
And did Denise have anything specific? She's been on.
I think she just wanted to know the rundown of like how we did it, what happened, and the timeline from what I got from her this afternoon.
Okay.
I'd also like to thank her for the coverage that we've received in Cape Cod Times. think
I agree. And
very
she's going to
fair.
actually put something in for us about having residents that have not updated their contacts to update them, which I really appreciate.
Thank you for bringing that up. And that's something that we talked about in the next billing cycle that we have with Penachuk, that we would put a notice or request in the bills for people who have not updated, that they do use this as an opportunity to update their contact information. Good. Well, if there's no further comments,
Motion to adjourn.
I would make, yes. Do I hear a second?
I can't second, but I will.
I can second. And so, Kateri, are you prepared to adjourn?
I think she left.
We have to have Neil vote so we can close the meeting.
Yeah. Is Neil still with us?
He
still
is.
there.
Okay, Neil, are you ready to close the meeting?
I don't know that he knows how to unmute himself.
He's still muted. Okay. All right, well.
We'll have to take that as affirmative.
We're adjourned by default. How's that?
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Talk
Thank
to you
you, Eric.
soon.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.